cr101radio.com, podcasts, and more.
11. Authority. Chalcedon Report number 48, August the 1st, 1969. Our subject this month is authority. Let us begin with police authority. In the early 1920s in Detroit, my father went one day to meet a newly arriving immigrant, an elderly priest. The old man's life had been spent in the Near East and Europe. He came directly from the continent. After their greeting, my father asked certain plain questions about conditions in the old world, and the priest hastily shushed him, indicating the presence of a policeman nearby. My father laughed with delight and explained that, in America, the police are our friends and protectors. The old man could not have been more emphatic in his disbelief. On their way home, my father stopped at a home near a school for a few minutes. The school was letting out, and children ran happily to the crossing. The patrolman was a favourite of all the children, and the children competed happily to hold his hand. At this, the old priest broke down and wept openly. This, he said, was the difference between America and the old world. Here, the police were loved by the children and regarded by the people as their protectors. There, the police were feared as political agents. What has happened since then? If the police have changed, it is generally very much for the better. Better trained, more courteous, more honest, and better informed in the law. That old priest who died in the 1940s always spoke of the authority and honour of the policeman's position in America. Things have changed since then. What is the reason? And what has changed? Very clearly, the police have been the target of a subversive attack. There has been a systematic attempt to discredit the police. Granted, but an attack is a failure unless it finds a receptive people. Why have people been so ready to accept anti-police propaganda? Faults are there in the police, as in every group in society. But why this demand for perfection? Why the total hostility to law and order? Some insist that anyone who uses the term law and order favourably belongs to the enemy, that is, as a part of a hated establishment. Why? Let us examine briefly the mainsprings of the modern or humanistic era in order to know the answer. Education has been the basic faith and hope of modern man. Knowledge is power, and education is man's salvation. Added to this is humanistic man's denial, first, that man is a sinner, and second, that even in his sin, man has an inescapable knowledge of God and of God's law. Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 20. Instead, humanistic man, after John Locke, held to the belief that man's mind is a blank piece of paper awaiting the work of the teacher. The child, therefore, could be, it was held, totally reconditioned by the right kind of education. If only the church and family could be prevented from polluting the child's mind before the school reached it, utopia would speedily arrive. The school and the university have, over the generations, worked successfully to undercut the authority of the home and of Christianity. This has meant replacing the authority of God with the authority of man. But if man is his own authority, who can be an authority over man, except many men, many gods outvoting one God? Moreover, then, there can be no overall law binding either individual man or mass man. Law and authority, thus, become enemies to humanistic man and his schools. Numerous college and university students have reported to me their experiences, all very much alike. Education professors commonly begin a course by saying, "How can we educate for the future when we do not know what the future is? There is no truth for today and tomorrow alike. We cannot teach a body of knowledge as valid for tomorrow. The one reality is change, And we must educate for change, for continuous revolution. An historian began a course by denying that there is such a thing as history, a law professor by attacking the idea of law, and so on. Only in the sciences is there much educational discipline left, and only because, without it, their field would collapse. Even here, engineers and others report a growing decline. If man is his own authority, then there is no authority over man, and God, parents, and police become symbols of tyranny and oppression, because authority other than anarchistic man's is intolerable. The New Left is the logical and inescapable product of modern education because it is anarchistic and statist to the core. Anarchism and statism are different aspects of the same humanistic creed. The anarchist denies the state. Man is his only God, law and authority. The statist, Marxist, Fabian, fascist, or democratic, says, true, but many men have more authority than one man. In either case, there is an erosion of authority, a breakdown of law and order. We are getting today what we have paid for. Our public schools are delivering precisely the product of humanistic education that they have been asked to deliver. To deny Christian faith a place in education, to convert schools into statist agencies, and then to expect anything other than what we have is the mark of a fool. And fools can be more dangerous than knaves, because the fool is on every side of the field. Every society, whether a backward tribe or a highly advanced nation, represents a law order. Every law order is an expression of a moral and religious faith. Change the faith and morality which undergird that law order, and its authority and its ability to maintain itself begins to collapse. This is our problem. Our Christian foundations have been destroyed. We now have humanism as the established religion of church, state, school, and society. This new religion is denying and shattering the old authority with only anarchism and statism as its alternatives. The result is growing chaos. This is not all. Because humanism makes a man his own authority, it enthrones childishness, self-indulgence, and tantrums over maturity, self-discipline, and reason. Much of the protests have been marked by more emphasis on childishness than on issues. Observers have noted the high glee and immense self-satisfaction many of these demonstrators show on urinating and even defecating in public. The glow of childish delight in these acts was the most startling aspect of the performance, the sheer joy in a baby's act. This impulse is deeply embedded in our humanistic age. Not too long ago, a television interviewer asked a group of guests, kindergarten children all, what they would most like to be. The answers were the same. They all wanted to be babies. Why? Because, they answered, babies have nothing to do, and they are cared for. There was a time when kindergarten children wanted to be grown-ups. This was the social ideal, maturity. Now it is babyhood. Elderly women dressed like little girls, and old men like small boys, and they tried to act as though perpetual youth was their hope. Is it any wonder that high school and college youth act like babies, and that kindergarten children want to be babies, when the adults of our time are themselves at war with mature responsibility? Is it any wonder that authority is gone? A baby has to be trained into respect for authority, but grown-up babies are at war against authority, and therefore at war against life as God ordained it. Authority is an inescapable necessity. It is authority which binds man to man in society. This binding is only secondarily by force. The essential and primary power of authority rests in a common faith and a general assent to certain religious presuppositions. Humanism denies the principle of transcendental authority. It affirms the Satanic principle that every man is his own God, knowing or deciding for himself what constitutes good and evil. Genesis chapter 3, verse 5. The world of autonomous, humanistic man is a world of lawlessness, in which every man asserts his independence of all laws not of his own making or choosing. Humanism leads to self-righteousness, since every man is right in his own eyes, and there is no other law. The war of the humanist against law and order is an immoral, self-righteous protest, in that he begins by assuming religiously that righteousness was born with him, and that all law and order is, by definition, evil. The total humanist will, if logical, become the total criminal, totally at war against all law and order. And this is precisely the goal of the, quote, new intellectuals, end quote. The police have been able in the past to cope with ordinary criminals, but the total criminal works to subvert every basis of authority and law, in church, state and school, in the courts, and in the legislative chambers. His warfare is more nearly total war than anything else we have yet seen. But it is also destructive of himself. Man needs air for his physical life, and law is the air of his social life. Unless that law is true law, God's law, society dies of strangulation. We are thus in the last days of a humanistic era. Man's attempt to return to the womb is a fast trip to the tomb. The world of humanism is sick. Let it die. Its spoiled brats are bent on suicidal destruction. Mature man will work for Christian reconstruction,